What's up? It's Nate. Before we start the show, here's a quick message from Theater Arts Tucson. Oh, right. It's still me. Theater Arts Tucson is the company that I run with the goal of promoting theater to audiences around southern Arizona. If you'd like to learn more and see the calendar with all of the professional theater productions in Tucson, visit theaterartstucson.com. You can also check it out on Facebook and Instagram at Theater Arts Tucson and on Blue Sky at theaterartstucson.com. Your support is very much appreciated. Now, on to the show. Welcome to another episode of the TheatreQs podcast. We have some incredible upcoming guests, which you can learn about on the Nate Wiley Productions social media pages. And if you have a question for any of my guests, email them to theatreqs@natewileyproductions.com or DM them to Nate Wiley Productions on Instagram. I just finished a 3-day-long sitzprobe for my school's upcoming production of Mary Poppins. But what exactly is a sitzprobe? Let's find out. A sitzprobe is the first set of rehearsals that combine the band and the actors. Usually, a sitzprobe focuses only on music and adjusting the timing of music with the band members, conductor, and music director. In German, Sitz means to sit, and probe is rehearsal. Altogether, sitzprobe means a seated rehearsal. All musicals or operas typically have a sitzprobe in order to sync up the band and the actors. That way, opening night is the perfect blend of music and singing. Backstage Magazine says a key part of being prepared for a sitzprobe is patience. These rehearsals can be long and tedious, and patience on part of the actors, creative team, and musicians is important to maintaining productive rehearsals and keeping the show on track for a successful run. Well, now it's time to sit down and enjoy today's interview. See what I did there? Sits. Like a sits probe. It's really funny because of the sits. You get it. Moving on. My guest today has performed around the world and founded Tempe's The Bridge Initiative after spending 14 years living in New York City. You may recognize her from her performances in Scrooge and The Music Man at Arizona Theater Company, The Diary of Anne Frank at Child's Play, or maybe from the upcoming documentary project which she is writing and producing, See Jane Run, an Indo story. Not only is she a fantastic person, but she is also an advocate for women in the theater and the theater as a whole. Please give a warm welcome to the incredible Brenda Jean Foley. How did you become interested in theater? What was that sort of moment that sparked your interest?
There wasn't one specific moment. I kind of came into it through dance. My father was a diplomat, and so we moved a lot growing up, and that meant that the one constant for me was ballet. Anywhere I was in the world, I could go into a ballet class and understand the language and feel at home. And so I started with dance, and then I started with singing. So I started doing musical theater, and then as I was looking to graduate high school, I didn't think that I was allowed to major in something that was in the arts because my parents were not in the arts and everybody around me was not in the arts. I was in a science and technology magnet school. And so I didn't know what to major in. And I was just like, as I was applying to college, my mother at some point was like, well, have you thought about music? And it was like suddenly this permission, like this weight came off my shoulders. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to do that. And so I applied to college for opera, actually, for voice, almost everywhere, except, again, I'd started doing musical theater and I didn't love opera. Like my voice kind of can go there, but I didn't love that kind of singing. My heart was in musical theater. Mm-hmm. So I applied to one school for musical theater and that's where I ended up. And sort of the rest is history. But that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, growing up in different places, you were born in Michigan, right?
Yeah, actually, I was born outside Detroit. Yeah, I never lived there, though, till college.
Yeah, so moving around different places, was there, theater in those places? Was there a theater scene?
That's a really good question. So, when I lived in the DC area until I was 4, and I don't even know. Then we moved to Switzerland, and we used to go to pantomimes. I don't even know if you even know what pantomimes are. It's like a British, they're kind of like, they usually are fairy tales. They're kind of goofy. They're very broad comedy. It's a very specific style. And so we used to go to that. And then but I was not connected to any kind of theater scene in Geneva. And then when we moved to Canada, I was in Kingston, Ontario for a year. And again, I was not at all aware of any theater scene there. I was in choir. Then I went to Montreal. And again, I was in ballet. I attended the Nutcracker. And, Cats was the first time I ever like encountered theater, like the way that you would think of theater. I think I went to like concerts, like there was a singing group called Sharon, Lois, and Bram that we went to see. But I don't really go see theater. And then when we moved back to the DC area, at that time, DC was not even a big theater town, especially the Virginia side, because I was in the Fairfax County. Now it's a huge theater town. But at the time it really wasn't. And so, like I said, I kind of got into it through musical theater, through friends who, like my best friend from ballet was doing theater. So she's like, oh, they need dancers, come do carousel at my high school, and so I kind of started getting into it. And then I liked the people and but in terms of seeing it, it took until my senior year when I was starting to apply to colleges and looking to do it more seriously. And my parents got us a subscription to the Kennedy Center, which is kind of ironic now.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. But that was like, in some ways, I feel like that might have been the first professional plays I saw. Because they got a subscription to the whole season. So like it included, I think Guys and Dolls, but it also included Oleana by David Mamet and
sure.
Twilight of the Golds, which was with Jennifer. Oh my gosh, what's her name? The woman for Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing. She was starring in this weird play that came through. So that was the first time I really saw plays, and I saw Mandy Patinkin in concert, and I saw just like that season really sort of like opened my eyes a little bit more to what theater. But I mean, I was the kid who got to college for musical theater who'd never heard of Stephen Sondheim. Like I didn't, my knowledge was so limited. So it really took like those theater history classes in college for me to understand sort of the scope of plays. And I mean, I guess in high school we studied Shakespeare a little bit, but I don't think I ever saw it. So, yeah.
So really it was sort of, you heard about musical theater and you were in like a couple shows probably, and then you went straight to college for musical theater. Were you nervous at all about that? Because that's different, obviously, than what you were doing previously.
Yeah, I mean, again, because my family was much more like not in the arts. As much as my mother was like, go major in music, they were like, you need a second major. Like, it's not okay to just major in music, because they sort of felt like it was not something that was going to be a safe career path. So I had a second major. I was majoring in English as well, because actually a lot of the things overlapped, and I could graduate in 4 years. But the first day I remember they sat us down, all the theater majors and musical theaters, in an auditorium, and the head of the musical theater program and the head of the theater program, with our parents there, said, okay, we want to say this out loud to all of you students, knowing that your parents are here to hear it. If there's anything else that you can do it. If you can major in something else, if there's anything else that you can see yourself doing that you can enjoy, you would enjoy, do it. If there's nothing else that you can envision yourself doing that would, light you up, we are very happy that you're here. But it's a slog. There's no guarantees. It's very challenging, and we need you, like, before you start on this journey and pay all this money, to understand and know that. And at the time, it was like there was my backup. So I just kind of was like, yeah, no, this is what I want to do. And it didn't feel, it didn't feel all that scary, weirdly, in part because I'd gotten in. And, it was a tiny, there's 20 of us in our class. So it was like, okay, well, if I've gotten this far, that's a good sign. Again, like I was getting the English major. So I kind of figured like, if it doesn't work out, I'll pivot. But I always felt as though I didn't want the what if sort of hanging over my head. And I also think because I'd moved so much, the idea of moving to New York or like going on tour or like those kinds of things, the unstable life side of it didn't scare me. But certainly the like, can you pay your rent side of it? I always kind of felt confident that I would be able to find some kind of survival job. There's certainly at 18, there was a lot of things that I didn't know and I was probably arrogant, but yeah, I wasn't all that afraid, I guess I would say.
What did you do right after college? Was there, did you go right into theater or did you exercise your other degree?
No. So, at Michigan, we did a showcase in New York City. And again, it was a small class. And I think we graduated only like 14 of us or something. So we did, we went to the city, we did a showcase, and my whole class, we all moved pretty much, to New York. I guess one or two moved to LA, but, my college roommate and I got an apartment. I mean, I did summer stock a couple of times while I was in college. So I'd already been paid to perform, small amount, but I'd been, I'd been hired in the Catskills. I'd been hired in New Hampshire. I'd done, shows and stuff professionally. And they really did prepare us about like how to audition, how to, go to New York and what, your book needed, all that stuff. So no, I moved immediately to New York. And started auditioning and had, temp jobs. And I started working for Backstage, which was the casting newspaper. And actually I exercised my degree, is to put it the way I was a proofreader for them because I had an English degree. So I would go on Monday nights and Tuesday nights and proofread the casting notices before they got put in the paper on Thursday. That'll
neat.
date me, but yeah, it was out on the paper. Everybody would go to the newsstands in New York and pick up their Backstage bag, because it wasn't online at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well,
so I did immediately. Go ahead.
Now the only thing in newsstands is like icebreakers and little gum packages.
Yeah, no, Backstage news. I mean, it was this big thick thing, and you'd go pick it up every Thursday morning. All the actors would go pick it up and circle or cut out, your auditions for the week. But yeah, I worked for Backstage for a little bit because of my English degree. And also I think it helped me get temp jobs and stuff too. I knew that waiting tables was not for me. It's in some ways a better job because you get paid more, but I couldn't do that. So yeah, I did use my English degree right away, but I did go into theater right away.
What are the differences that you've noticed, at least? Obviously there's some big ones, but between the New York and Arizona theater scenes, I feel like they're both, pretty vibrant communities.
So I think Tucson, where you are, is vibrant. I think Phoenix is a bit challenging when it comes to professional theater. It's a very vibrant community theater town. So you can, if you don't want to get paid for theater, you can do theater every day. There's not a lot of union work, and there's not a lot of even paid work here. In terms of the differences, gosh, they're humongous. There's so many. I think that one of the things that might be surprising is that the quality, I think, in Arizona can rival a lot of the stuff that you'll see in New York. It's just the ecosystem in terms of professional, having a career, sustainable, is not in existence. And it's not in existence most places other than New York or maybe Chicago. But like DC, it does okay. There's other cities, and the size of Phoenix is actually embarrassing that we have as little theater as we do, professional.
Yeah. Was that a struggle for you moving from New York to Phoenix, kind of having that, big change?
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, so we moved because we came here intending to only be here for a couple of years for my husband to get a graduate degree. And I, at that point I'd been in New York for 14 years. We had a baby, and I was like, okay, I'm done. I did my New York thing. I'm going to move on to be housewife and, breadwinner for a couple of years while he's in grad school. And then I'll see what my next chapter is. I felt like I'd been there and done that. But after a couple of years, it was just like the addict that was like scratching, like, I miss it. And so that's when I started auditioning and got back into it. So I think initially leaving was in a way hard, but also I felt like, okay, that whole what if that had caused me to say, I'm going to major in this, I'm going to try this, had been answered. Like I tried it, I did it. I had, the success that I had, and I was ready for the next thing. And I had just become a mom, and being a parent in New York, unless you have lots and lots of money, we were kind of looking at our kid going like, $40,000 for preschool is not possible. What's the next step? And as soon as the kid was 20 pounds and you're carrying the stroller and the kid on the subway, it's a lot. So we were looking for what the next step was. And I thought my next step was not going to be theater. So when I decided I wanted to get back into it, it was, that was the sort of reframing for me of like what quote unquote success looks like, what level of theater I wanted to do. Did I want to keep my professional status, my union card? All these things sort of came up, but initially that's not why we came to Arizona. So I think, like the transition was about things other than my theater career.
Yeah. So I want to ask a little bit about, being a union actor. How long were you in New York before that came about? Because obviously you have to perform a certain amount and, have certain credits to be in the union.
Actually, that's not true. Kids can be in the union. The only thing that you need to become a union actor is to be offered a union contract. And so
okay.
Anybody who's offered a union and actually for a while we had open access, which meant that anybody who'd been given a professional contract, like that you could prove that you'd been paid to perform, then you can just file with the union and say, I want to join. And then as long as you pay your dues, you could join. I think open access has shifted a little bit, but I don't know. I've not kept up with what it was. At the time that I went to New York, it was always that if you got a union contract, you could join. Or at the time, there was a thing called membership candidacy, which meant that if you worked 40 weeks at union theaters, then you were eligible. So I moved. Oh, okay. I'd done because of my summer stock, I had a certain number of weeks already. And then actually the first job I got that spring, because I moved in August and I auditioned, and then I got a job that spring at a union theater, and I could have asked for a union contract because it was a union house, and they asked if I wanted a union contract, and I felt like I want to do more non-union work first. I wanted to get a tour under my belt. I wanted to have bigger roles on my resume because I felt like if I joined right out of college with just a couple summer stock credits, that I'd be walking into those union auditions and like I just would get lost. So I said no to that first union contract and stayed non-union for a little while and did my national tour and got a few roles under my belt and got some stuff on my resume. And then it came to the point that once again, I was offered a union contract, and that time I was ready. And I said yes. So that was, I guess, like 3 years out of college. I did a show. I did Grease, and they just said, "Do you want a union contract?" And I said, "Yes, I'm ready." So at that time, I took the union contract. I paid my dues, and I joined. So I've been a member since the year 2000. So 25 years.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the national tour. Obviously, you moved around growing up, so that probably wasn't a huge change. But seeing the different audiences in different cities would have to be really incredible.
Excuse me. It's so interesting that you say that because, yes, there is definitely some differences, but so the show that I did was Big, the musical. I don't know if you know it.
Oh, yeah. Based on the Tom Hanks movie, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a movie that is popular, and that's a story that people know, so it kind of plays anywhere. It wasn't controversial, but I will say that I had a small I was in the ensemble, and then I had like a featured role in Act 2, and the gentleman who played my husband happened to be a Black man. And we had like a moment that there was like a little kiss, just, part of the scene. And the reception, and it was a funny scene. The reception in certain places in the South, we did not get the same laugh. People did not like this blonde girl with that Black man. And there were definitely like, sometimes the people would like, different theaters would be like, oh, we're going to host you all for like a reception or whatever. We would get like cold shoulder. It was fascinating. Because racism is real. Yeah. Racism showed its head. And it was ugly. And, and again, the people liked the show, and we were not leads, like in terms of the story. So we had like one scene. So like there was a chill for like a scene, or at least, dampening. And then the show came back, but like, it was really interesting. And as somebody who's, again, always moved lots of different places, like my friends were never the same color as me. It was like, I didn't understand what was happening at first. And Todd had to tell me. He was like, do you know why this is, it's like, why aren't people laughing anymore? And he's like, because. And I said, oh my goodness. Yeah. And I mean, and this is 1998. I don't know if it's better or worse now. My friends who are Black will tell you that racism is real. So, I experienced that firsthand. So when in terms of when you say audience reaction, that was the one piece that I noticed.
Is that something that you've, experienced after that, or is that just exclusive sort of to that, type of big production, if you will?
I feel like that's a question you would need to ask a person of color. I know that there are challenges in this industry, and it's both internal within, like, unfortunately within hiring practices and within casts and within, and then it's also in terms of reception from audiences. I did a show a few years back here in Arizona that I was, I was the only white female on the show. And I think there was 2 white men. So it was majority Black cast. And, that was awesome. I had so much fun. And, but I think in part because people that were coming to that show, I mean, the show is actually a lot about colorism. It's called By the Way, Meet Vera Stark by Lynn Nottage. And, so I feel like the audience that's coming to that show is not necessarily going to be an audience that's going to have any problem with,
Sure.
watching Black performers, So, but yeah, I would encourage you in your podcast, like if you wanted to talk to some people about how the industry is, my hope is that we're better than we were in 1998, but my fear is that there's still a lot out there, and I just don't feel comfortable speaking for other people's experience.
Of course. I do want to bring up that you started a theater company in Tempe, the Bridge Initiative, which you are the producing executive director of. So what inspired you to start that? Was that out of that sort of lack of theater in Phoenix, or was there another reason?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. It's actually the second company I've started. I started a company in New York City also. And so when we moved here, about a year or two after we'd moved, a friend from New York was like, oh, my other friend from New York is also moving to Phoenix. You need to get together. And so I met this other woman from New York City who she had, while she was in New York City, done a lot of work with the Women's Project Theater. And they had an initiative at the time that was called 50/50 by 2020. So, it was 2010 or something when she was there. So they were thinking, okay, in 10 years, let's try and have 50% of plays that are produced, directors that are working, leadership, actors be women. Like we're 50% of the population, we should be 50% of the industry.
Very cool.
And yeah. And so Tracy was very attuned to this idea of 50/50. And when she moved to Phoenix, she was looking around and she was like, everybody in charge is men. They're, for the most part, especially at the professional theaters, the plays and musicals that they're producing are written by men. There's very few female directors. And then she came to me and she's like, would you want to work with me on starting something that would empower women? And I was like, okay. Because again, it was not something that I had focused on prior to that. But then once you see it, you can't unsee it. So like we did start to find statistics about, at the time, who was in charge, what were they producing, all these things. And so, yeah, so it was that. And also this idea of both of us were union members. Both of us had come from New York, had come from the East Coast, where there's a lot of opportunity for professional work. And so from the beginning, when we started Bridge, we felt like one of our missions is to pay people, to compensate people for their time. Even if we have somebody, working backstage or sometimes even loading in, we'll pay people. We can't pay people. We can't always pay a union contract. We've only done that a couple times, unfortunately. But we have tried to model that even small theaters, if that's the priority, you can have less money that you're putting into your sets or your costumes and more money that you're putting into your people. So, we, from the very outset, it was twofold. It was to amplify women, especially in particular. And then that became like, as you start amplifying one underrepresented group, you start realizing like, oh, there's all these other underrepresented groups. So we also try to amplify other underrepresented groups, be it race, be it size, be it age, be it ability. We try to, be inclusive. And then also this professional aspect of like, here's a theater that is actually paying people. And look, it's not that hard, people. If this is what you care about, we try and model that it can be done.
That's very cool. I, appreciate that you're doing that. I think that's something that a lot of theater companies should strive to do, for sure, if they're not already doing it.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, and also, yeah. And again, like for me, there's so many different levels, right? Like even if you're paying your gas money, like just something, but there's definitely at least in Phoenix, there's the way that a lot of people look at it is like, oh, theater's just something you do for fun, which is fine. I think it's important that those exist. I just wish it wasn't like almost every theater. And what I also find frustrating is that a lot of theaters will pay their staff. Oftentimes they'll pay musicians. They'll sometimes pay a director. They'll rarely pay the actors. So it's like we're trying to be like, everybody should get paid, not just, the people in the office.
Yeah, for sure. How do you balance, your being an executive and performing in regional shows like, Scrooge and The Music Man and all of your other credits?
Well, so Bridge is kind of backwards in terms of like we pay our artists, but we don't really pay the admin side. So I, even though I'm an executive, I'm not getting paid for that. So what's harder in some ways is balancing like my job that I have to make like my living most of the time. Yeah, I mean, Bridge at this point, like I've been doing it for 10 years and I've worked through those 10 years to find the people who want to be in it with me. And so we share the workload. And like, if I'm doing Scrooge, then I'm not there to do stuff so other people do it. But we also don't do a full season. Like we can't afford that because, again, we pay people. So we do like one production and then we do a few like readings and other things. But we don't do like 5 shows in a year. So most of the Bridge work that I'm doing is like the books, the budget. Like I tend to do that side of things. And then like also some of the promotion, and when we've got like cabarets and readings and things coming up, I'm trying to get press releases out and those kinds of things. But it's definitely not a full-time job because it can't be. So when I go do a show at like Arizona Theater Company, that's my full-time job. And so I'm squeezing in like an hour here or there from Bridge. But, as a professional, when I get the opportunity to work as a professional, that's my job.
how do you choose shows for
Oh,
the
like what
bridge?
to
I think
do? Oh,
no,
for
I think
bridge.
just like what shows that choose to perform. What do you see in a good book?
So it's varied over the years. We launched with a national play contest, and we did a brand new play that had never been done before, and we had readers that evaluated it, and it was the one that won the national play contest, and we produced it. And then we did a couple of festivals that were readings of new work, and again we just had like a huge number of people that read across the country because we'd have like 100 scripts submitted, so we'd have a bunch of readers and narrow it down, and then had like three winners that we would read.
Hmm.
When we started producing actual plays, which took a couple seasons, it was as a result of we started doing readings of existing scripts, but we wanted to do plays that nobody else was doing, and we wanted to produce plays by women. And so the first play that we produced was in co-production with Tempe Center for the Arts, and that one was a play that we'd done a reading of the previous year. It's by Lauren Gunderson, and she's like a nationally known playwright and has been really, really popular the last couple of years, but at the time nobody had done her in Arizona really. So we wanted to do a Lauren Gunderson. So in theory it was like a playwright that should be known that maybe wasn't, and it had great roles for women, and four-handers, four people. And we knew that we could do, one of the things that we look for is plays that aren't going to be something that requires a huge set, like a lot of spectacle, that are actor driven. Because our budget, we want to put towards people, not things. So and again, because of that, we also tend to be small cast. But then more recently, the last couple of years, we've actually had a season selection committee. Like for a couple of years, like myself with Tracy, the other co-founder, we would pick them. Tracy moved back to the East Coast. I had a couple other friends and other executive committee people. We would sort of pick the seasons. But then the last couple of years, we've said, you know what? We want the community to be involved. So we've asked anybody who wants to be on the season selection committee to recommend titles. And so they've been getting together the last couple of years and going through a process of, people, propose plays. They read them, they bring them to, now the artistic director is no longer me. So they bring them to Amy. And she usually consults with me, but she, it's up to her. And she said, okay, this is what this season selection committee wants. And she decides whether or not she agrees with them. But this year, their top two things are the two things that we put on our season. This coming year, we're probably going to be doing a new musical that actually is from a friend of mine from New York that they've written, and
very cool.
They're coming to us with funding, like a producer, and like a specific, they want to see it in a small venue. So that one, I think we're going to put on our season just because it's awesome. And it's a jukebox musical in terms of it's actually existing songs that are put into a new script.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
So we think that it could have some real legs and actually has the potential to go back out there. Like once it's done here, it'll probably have a life. So it's kind of cool to be attached to that, and that opportunity, and the directors coming in from New York and all these things. But that's, again, like that kind of fell into our lap this year. So that'll probably happen August, September, but then our next show next winter will probably be something that comes out of the season selection committee, that is this group of community people that volunteered to read a bunch of plays and talk about them and decide, what they want to recommend to us to do.
Very neat. I want to bring up your documentary, which you just finished, right? See Jane Run.
I've finished shooting it. I've not finished editing it.
So soon, right?
Let's hope.
So what was that like? How do you go about, producing and writing a documentary? Because that's a lot of coordinating.
Yeah. So I met this woman through theater years ago. We were both speaking at a conference, and I kind of fell in love with her. And then over the pandemic, I got to know her better, and she invited me to start working for her company out of Oregon, doing grant writing. And then as I was doing grant writing, I found out more about her personal story. Like I was just inspired by her as a professional. But then when I started learning about her, I thought like her story needs to be out there because it's really interesting. She's an immigrant refugee. She's part of, she's an Indo, which is a culture that is actually disappearing because it's a specific mix of Indonesian and Dutch. And those people got expelled from the Dutch East Indies when Indonesia reclaimed their land. But it meant that basically this Indo culture that's a very specific mix no longer exists. So she, they call themselves like the last of the Mohicans, like they're, they're kind of dying off. She's one of the last of that generation. So I decided like I really wanted to see if this was a thing. And I met a guy who does documentaries and he's like, I say no to everybody, Brenda, but like there was something about you and there was something about this story. I said yes. So I hooked Bruce in and he kind of has been mentoring me. And yeah, it's a process. Like every step of the way, it was like, okay, we've got to raise some money so we can go to Portland because she lives in Portland, Oregon. So we can go to Portland and shoot. And Bruce was like, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to figure out who your audience is. You need to be starting to think about all these things even before we shoot. But like, then you need to raise the money. So, so I did some crowdfunding. Jane like went to her family and friends. And so we got enough money for me Bruce and I to fly to Portland. We hired people there to film. But from the beginning, Bruce kept saying to me, he was like, what happens with documentaries is you think it's about one thing and then it pivots. The story will change on you. And he was right, because I kind of thought I really thought initially that the story was about like this, this refugee who came from like her trauma and whatever of the past, and how she triumphed as this like arts person. And she, created this great change for theater in Portland and all these things. But the more that we dug into it, the more, and Bruce said from the beginning, he was like, I think we need to go to Indonesia. And I'm like, why do we need to go to Indonesia? And how are we going to go to Indonesia? And, but he was right. Like the more we dug into it, it was like, her arts activism was lovely and all that, but that wasn't the story. Like the story really is her heritage and her like finding out who she is and her identity. She wouldn't know that that was a story even from the beginning because she felt like she knew who she was. But it took us flying to Indonesia and one of the people there saying, welcome home, and her bursting into tears for us to go like, oh, this is what this is about. Wow. And so, yeah, it just, it's been one thing after another of like raising the money and figuring out, the writing piece of it is still kind of in process. Like I'm still absorbing all because I, if I could wipe my calendar, and have nothing else to do and sit and like, watch the tape footage over and over and over again, I would be done by now. But we got back from Indonesia almost exactly a year ago. And then I went like immediately into production for Anne Frank in the summer. And then I did Scrooge. And so like, it's been a lot. So this is the first time that I've kind of had a break. So I'm really digging in and watching all the footage again and just really sort of living with it. And I need help because I'm new to this. I've written screenplays before, but not a documentary. And so I'm in the process right now of selecting an editor who has experience and knows the storytelling piece of it and can help me. And then when we're ready, the director will come back in and help shape it too. But really right now I'm in the process of figuring out what I think the story is and then like hiring an editor who's really going to be able to help me. But that again is going to require more money because it's like we raised the money to get to Indonesia and now it's like, great, we have all this footage. But I believe strongly, and that's probably clear in what else I've been saying today, but I believe strongly in paying people, professional people, for what they do. And editors make a lot of money. So it's, back to the drawing board of like, how do I raise money? And so my plan right now is I've been taking a class and they said if you have a really strong trailer, that's how you go out to industry and to other people and say like, look, this is the thing that we can possibly do. So I'm going to pay a couple $1,000s to get a trailer done with, now that the footage that we have from Indonesia is so good. And we have so that's the next step. And then I'll be able to have the money to pay one of these editors that I'm interviewing to just really to get it done. So my goal is to have like a rough cut by the end of this year. But yeah, we are nowhere near done. We are in process, very much in process.
Well, I thank you for taking some of your editing time to be here today. So
you're very welcome.
So what are the next steps once you have the rough cut down? Are you going to submit to film festivals and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm learning all these things, but it's like, so you have an assembly cut, then a rough cut, then, the polished cut. And then, and then you start, I think our plan will be to submit to festivals. Um, there's just a zillion festivals. Like I'm in calls right now. I'm taking this class, and there's just so many different ways you can strategize it. Talking with Bruce and really learning about distribution right now, they kind of are encouraging you to do a lot of it yourself, especially with docs. So I think, it would be great to get into a couple of festivals, but ultimately I think that this film will probably have premieres, obviously in Portland where she lives, here where we live. And then we have people in Indonesia who want us to bring it back there. So we, we'll probably tour it a little bit ourselves. And then also it's a kind of film that ideally would end up on like PBS. So we'll probably be trying to, connect with distribution places. And, there's, like I said, there's so many different ways to get it out there. There's, ultimately you could put it on Vimeo and just like everybody hand out, the website, but it's hard to get that into a lot of people. And ideally that's, you want it to be distributed broadly. So ultimately, I think hopefully we would get some kind of distribution deal with somebody. It ended up on whatever platforms. And there's, again, this whole strategy that I'm learning about. It's like, you want to do, X before Y. So, and I don't even really know, but it's like, you don't want to do, like you would want to do Netflix, or you'd want to do something like that before you would go to Amazon Prime, because there's a zillion things on Amazon Prime and you get lost. So you'd want to do something that, and if you go to Amazon Prime first, then Netflix is not going to take you. So it's like, there's just all this strategy about it. But certainly if you can get into a couple big film festivals, then that helps so, it's just like, festivals will probably be a piece of it, but it's just really, really, really competitive and hard now. So we'll see. And it costs money to apply to every festival and money to go there. So, all of it comes kind of back to how much money we can raise to do that whole, the whole dance of it. But right now I'm trying to learn about it, and I'm trying to not be intimidated and overwhelmed by it, which is hard some days. But I'm trying to just like put one foot in front of the other and get the film done as I'm learning all these things about, like, once it's done, what the next steps will be.
Well, it sounds like a really powerful project. So, kudos to you for taking it on.
I'm excited about it. I'm passionate about it. And it's like, Bruce said, this is going to be like 7 years of your life, so you better care about it. And so far it's been, I think that was in 2022. So we're really working on year 3.
You're Lin-Manuel Miranda writing Hamilton.
God, that would be great. Yeah, sure. CJ Grant will be the next Hamilton. From your mouth to God's ears, as my mother would say.
So I also wanted to bring up, just because I saw it in your bio and I think it's really interesting, you've performed at Tokyo Disney Sea. That's...
Yeah, I performed a lot of weird places.
Yeah.
I performed on cruise ships. I performed at Lincoln Center. Yeah, I performed at Tokyo Disney Sea. That my callback for that was actually September 11th in New York City.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so I always know that I was in Tokyo in 2002 because I was doing my callback as planes were hitting the building, or like an hour after the planes hit the building, on September 11th. But yeah, I was at Disney from like February to August, so almost like 6-7 months. And the show that we did was, we were the second cast. They actually opened, I think, September 11th. Like, it's crazy. The first cast was in Japan when that happened. And it was a Broadway review. It was like, I literally played Dolly Levi and the big hat, and came down the staircase with the boys dancing and sang Hello Dolly. And I sang Memory in a cat suit, flew in on Tire. And I, did tap danced in a, 42nd Street style thing. Like, yeah, it was about a half an hour of a musical review. And I was a singer/dancer, and I had 3 different tracks that I would do, and we would do it 5 shows a day. So it was like a 8-hour work day. So you do the show, then you wait an hour, then you do the show again, then you have a lunch break, So, yeah, and it was 5 days a week, and then we had 2 days off. And yeah, so I was there, I think we rehearsed maybe 2-3 weeks, and then I performed it for the rest of that time. So, and Disney Sea is amazing.
I'm curious how performing in so many different places has sort of shaped your perspective of, the industry and just the impact of theater as a whole.
I believe in theater because I think that, now that I'm making a film, but I think that there's something that is magical about bringing people into the same space and having a shared experience. They've done all kinds of studies about like your heartbeats will synchronize. There's something about laughing or crying, breathing together. And I think that I wish that there was a way for like everybody to go to see theater like every week. I think that we'd live in a different world, because I think that we're really getting more and more disconnected. And even the previous Surgeon General, I think his name is Vivek Murthy, from Joe Biden's administration this past fall, he said loneliness is literally like a health problem in this country.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to answer your question, seeing theater and its impact on people at different spaces and countries and states and whatever, big towns, small towns, I think that there's like a unifying humanity to it, that is incredibly powerful. And I think our challenge, is to make it accessible to everybody. And, it's at the same time, as much as I emphasize paying people, like I also, one of the things we always do with Bridge is we keep our ticket prices low, and we, probably too low. And we always say, if there's any reason that you can't come, if the ticket price is still a barrier, contact us and we'll comp you. Because I just want to get as many people into the building and experiencing it as possible. But that's a challenge in this, in this climate, because it's expensive to produce theater. But yeah, that's a really long-winded answer. But I think that theater can be magical, and I think it can change people's minds. I think it can change people's outlooks. And I think it can, even if it's escapism, like people need that too. But there's something about being in that space with other humans, that is less isolating.
Yeah, I think to your point, just being able to go into a space with other people, whether or not they share the same, views as you do, and have that connection, I think is just this sort of beautifully unique and unifying experience that you really don't get anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. And the other aspect of it is storytelling, right? Like, depending on what you're seeing, sometimes theater is able to teach us lessons that it's harder to learn in other ways. Because if we can really empathize with the character and get inside their journey and understand what it's like to be them. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love being an actor, is you kind of get to be different people in a way that, regular other people in other professions don't get to step inside other people's shoes quite the same way. But I think that if you go and experience a show and you experience that journey and you experience that world that the playwright has created in those characters, sometimes they're real people, real stories, and sometimes they're made up. But either way, I think it has, somebody that I know refers to it as an empathy gymnasium. Like, it really exercises your ability to empathize with other humans and to understand other people's stories. And there's other, obviously, ways of storytelling. You can storytell on NPR and listen to, The Moth. You can storytell on television. You can, like, there's so many different ways you can storytell, but theater's, I think, one of the powerful ones that really can help us, again, recognize our own humanity, see ourselves on stage, but also see each other on stage. That helps us in real life. And I've also,
Definitely.
I've started teaching, I'm teaching at prisons these days too, and help watching these people interact with their own stories, like we have them write, but also we give them, scripts, and sort of hearing and seeing like the ability to experience empathy and to experience emotional literacy, really, that theater provides is potentially just life-changing, literally.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've performed in a lot of roles, playing real people and fictional characters like, Mrs. Cratchit. So I like to play a game with all of the guests that I have on here. And so this is a game that I'm going to call Lunchtime. As a mom, I know you've, probably packed a lot of lunches. So I will give you the names of 3 characters that you have played over your career, and you'll have to tell me 3 items that you would pack in their lunches. Does that sound good?
Love it. Yes.
All right. So the first is, of course, Mrs. Cratchit.
Okay. I think Mrs. Cratchit, well, it may be hard to pack for lunch, but I think she would be a stew kind of person, because it's hearty and filling and warm. So I'd pack her some stew, some crusty bread, and then I think she might like a little sweet, so maybe like a piece of chocolate or something.
The second is Mrs. Frank from The Diary of Anne Frank.
Mm-hmm. I would Edith want. I feel like I want to say she would have probably something kosher. So maybe like matzo ball soup, again, like something that's homey. I think, and again, that doesn't really sound like a lunch that you would pack, but if she had a thermos, Edith might have some matzo ball soup. I think she might have. I don't know why I keep coming back to crusty bread, but like that seems very European.
Everybody needs
somehow.
a little crusty bread, right?
It's one of my favorites, and I grew up in Europe too. So yes, let's give Edith some crusty bread, and I think maybe an apple. I feel like there's some like she's very in some ways proper and like health conscious. So I could see an apple seems very Edith.
And the third character is Maria in The Sound of Music.
Oh my goodness, what would Maria have? I mean, I think of schnitzel with noodles, which is in the song.
Yeah.
I feel like Maria might actually. She's definitely somebody who would take a picnic. So peanut butter and jelly, some carrot sticks, and an apple. I feel like she could do those basics because I feel like she wouldn't care that much as long as it's like nourishing and she could like go have it on the hills.
and
the hills are alive.
And sing about her favorite things.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for playing along there. That was fun.
Sure. I love it.
I like to close out each episode with the same 3 questions for all of my guests. And that's something that I've been doing since my first interview with John Plumpus a little over a year ago.
I need to listen to John's.
So the first question of what I call the Theater Threes are, what is your favorite musical?
True. I feel like this should be at my fingertips. I love the Fantastics.
Mm-hmm.
I also love West Side Story, and I love Ragtime.
Those are
It's very
3 great shows.
choose. Yeah, I guess I'd have to say those 3, but that you didn't ask me for 3. You asked me for 1, but I'll give you 3.
That's okay. We'll take it. The second question is, what actor did you look up to as a kid and why?
I didn't because I didn't watch things. And I didn't even really watch movies because I grew up in Switzerland and I didn't speak German. I didn't speak French. So we didn't even we'd see animated movies at the embassy. Like they could sometimes get us Disney movies, but like I didn't grow up watching things. So I actually still don't watch a lot of TV, don't go to a lot of films. So by the time that we were in a place that we were accessing like TV and like things regularly, I was not in the habit of watching it. So I never really had actors. I feel like the first time that I was sort of aware of like, wow, that was an amazing performance was when I saw Annette Bening in American Beauty. And actually even Kevin Spacey, who, you know, it's discredited at this point in a lot of ways, but like their performances in American Beauty really sort of like hit me of like, that's really good acting. But I never sort of idolized people as a child the way that you're talking. So I don't have a great answer to that question.
Do you speak French now or German?
So when I lived in Montreal, I went to French speaking schools. I was in a French school. So I was bilingual for a while. I don't have a chance to practice it much, but like when I went to France the last time, I tried to speak in French when we were out. And there was a guy at one of the restaurants. He was like, "Where are you from?" And I was like, well, at least he wasn't saying like, "Oh, you American, nice try," you know. But he was like, "Oh, I couldn't place your accent because I have a little bit of a Montreal accent, but it's not like a really thick Montreal because I started learning French in Switzerland." So anyway, but yeah, I still speak a little bit, but I'm really rusty. So it's pretty pathetic at this point, but I was at one time bilingual.
The third and final question of the Theater Threes is, what advice do you have for theater kids or anyone wanting to get into the industry?
Well, one thing I didn't say when we were talking about union performing is I always say to people, and that would probably not be kids, but necessarily, but like join the union when you're looking at the landscape and you don't see any non-union jobs that you want. If you're still wanting to perform the non-union jobs, don't join the union. But for kids, I would just say stay curious and keep working. Like learn. Like I think that you learn as much in a lot of ways doing shows as you do like doing classes. I think that anybody who really truly deeply loves it, I would go with what my college people said and say like, follow your heart, and you know that if you're not going to be happy not doing it, then do it, but also know that there's different ways to do it. So if you want to have a different career and have it be your avocation, like I said, there's tons of places that you can do it that people aren't going to pay you, and that you can keep doing it. Like it can be a lifelong thing. You just need to understand that it might change and evolve. And I would just also say, stay humble, stay willing to like talk to every person on any show. Like talk to the people at the box office, talk to the people on the fly rail. Like don't just it's important to be a good person and a nice person, a person people want to work with. There's so many talented people in this industry that if you're a jerk, nobody has to work with you. They'll go to the next person who's not a jerk. So don't be a jerk. So I guess that would be my advice. But yeah, like follow your heart and be open and flexible to your dreams and what you want to do with it changing, and just know that it's going to continue to be there. Every show is going to it's not your last show. It's going to continue to be there. And that's definitely something that I've struggled with of like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to work again? There's a moment of that right now. I'm like, I don't have a job lined up. Who knows? I don't know what my next one's going to be. Right now I'm working on my film.
You will.
Who knows? We'll see. I hope so. But if not, like I've done a lot of great things. So yeah. So I think all those things I would say to young people.
Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Like I said, you're editing, and talking to me for a while. It's always lovely to talk to you, and I regret that it's been this long. So,
well, it's my pleasure. Give my love to your mom and your sister, your family. It's lovely to see you. And yeah, the next time I'm in Tucson, we should get lunch or something.
Sure.
It'd be nice to actually see you.
Yeah. And thank you also for just all of the really cool and amazing work that you're doing in Phoenix, and then of course, touring and with ATC and all that. So
my pleasure. It's one of the big joys of my life is my work. So I'm fortunate.
Well, thank you so much. It was good to see you.
You too. Take care of yourself, Nate.
Thank you very much for joining me, Brenda. It is always a pleasure. If you are interested in See Jane Run and Indo's story, you can learn more about it at the link in the show notes. Also in the show notes, you can find more information about the Bridge Initiative and all of Brenda's work. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you soon with another episode. TheatreQs is produced by Nate Wiley Productions and me, Nathaniel Wiley, featuring music by Joyheads. Joyheads is a Pasadena-based music group composed of Juan Gomez, Daniel Johnson, and Jeremy King. The song that you heard in this episode is A Real Good Time. If you like what you hear in this podcast, follow the podcast and check out our website, natewileyproductions.com, for a wide variety of content, from historical series to photo galleries and much, much more. Thank you so much for listening today.